301. You guys need to follow along. Come on, let's go. You've had tons of time. Okay, on Friday, we started the Blue Wave Music page, which of course has a survey/form on it. So we got about halfway through creating the form. So we learned how to put in text boxes. We learned how to put in check boxes and radio buttons. Again, let's review what's the difference between putting in check boxes versus putting in radio buttons. Cameron.
Check boxes, you can click as many as you want and unclick them as many times as you want.
Exactly.
Radio circle boxes, you can only check one of the selected lists.
Exactly. Okay, so just keep that in mind whenever you have to design your own forms, that check boxes let you select as many check boxes as you want. And radio buttons only allow you to select one of the options. We left off on Friday by adding in, they call it a selection menu in the book, but I always like to call them a pull-down list because it always has the arrow beside of it and lets you pull down the list and select one. Again, with a selection menu, it only lets you choose one option. Now, what I want you to take a look at briefly here on page 301, because when you get to the labs, you're going to have to know the difference between the different types of selection menus. Now, we already did the first one, the sample one that they show us there on page 301, which is basically the pull-down list. Sample 2 shows you like a box, a scrollable box, where it displays 3 of the options. And you can, within the code, set it up to display how many ever options that you want it to display. Sample 3. Sample 3 lets you do a multi-selection. Okay, so if you want to have a list view, but you want to be able to select more than one, then sample 3 would be your setup. And then sample 4, you can set it up so that there is automatically one item selected already, kind of as the default selection. Okay, so anytime the directions tell you to use a selection menu, okay, you have to determine which of the 4 selection menus that it is that you need to set up, because as we just saw here on page 301, there are 4 different types. Okay, so we've got to keep that in mind. When we turn to page 302, it gives us the code for each of those samples that we just saw on page 301. So sample 1's code, where we have red, blue, yellow, green, black, and white. But of course, it's a pull-down list, so all we can see is the first option. Sample 2, notice within the selection name, we also have a size attribute. And that size attribute right now is set at 3, which means that you see the first 3 options. Sample 3, another attribute that gets added in, which is the multiple attribute. So this will let you do a multiple selection. It'll let you select more than one field. And then finally, sample 4, notice it still lets you select multiple options, but notice yellow is the option that comes already default selected. Okay, so anytime you have to do selection menus, I always refer students back to pages 301 and 302 because you can see what they look like, and it has the corresponding code that goes along with that. So for the next part of our Blue Wave Music survey, we're going to pick up around line 48 because the next section ask the name of a station that's not listed, because we on Friday left off with favorite internet radio station, and we just had it as a pull down list. What if we want them to be able to put in something that is not listed? Okay, because usually with most lists, not every option is actually given to you. So let's go ahead and modify this a little bit to reflect what we see there on page 303. So we're going to take out that beginning P tag, and we're going to put in our NBSP to give us a space. We're actually going to put in 2 of those. And instead of it obviously just being a line, we've got to get rid of that line. We want to be able to give them a text box that they can type in. Okay, so we've already done text boxes. Remember, the size just indicates how many characters, and max length controls the size of the text box. And get rid of that ending P tag as well. Okay, we only have one more field to put in our survey, and that is the next section that asks, what else can you tell us about your music preferences? For this particular one, we want to give them a text box, okay? Because we want them to be able to, you know, if they want to write a paragraph of text, well, we want to give them the opportunity to do that, since we're leaving this as an open-ended question where we're saying, what else can you tell us about your music preferences? Okay, so let's take a look at the bottom of page 303. We're going to put this in. So in front of the what else can you tell us about your music preferences, we can take out that beginning P tag. We're actually going to replace that with a BR tag. I can take out this line and the ending P tag. On the next line, I'm going to put in another BR tag. And now I'm going to set up my text box option. Notice that this one lets us control the size by indicating how many rows and how many columns we want available to the user. Okay, notice that this is also called a text area. text area because it can be as large or as small of a text box as you want. Okay, something else we need to do is we need to make sure that our form has a submit and a reset button. Submit actually sends the information that the user has filled out. The reset button will clear all of the fields out. So let's take a look at page 305. We have a notation here where it says insert, submit, and reset buttons here. So we obviously need to take that out. And we're going to replace it with the code that creates our submit and our reset buttons. Okay, again, that's on page 305. The value is the text that you're going to see on the button itself. Okay. Okay, after we get that put in, let's go ahead and save our page. And let's preview it in the browser. Because in essence, this should finish up our form. We still have an embedded style sheet to put in, but we can see our form. Make sure that everything looks correct. Also make sure that all of our fields are functioning as well. Okay, in your text box, notice you can type quite a bit of text. You also have a text box where you can name the station not listed. Good. So any problems or issues with the form up to this point? We're going to do a little grouping of fields together, add in the embedded style sheet, and that will finish off our page. If everyone is good.
Can Duffy do it harder for the group?
That's enough.
Dang it.
All right, take a look at page 306 and 307. A lot of times with forms and surveys, it makes sense to group certain types of fields together just because they're asking for the same type of information. And if you look on page 306 and 307, you guys should notice that there are boxes around. Let's start with first name, last name, and password. or email address. I don't know why they changed that to password. We'll look at page 307 because that one is the one that looks like ours. So on page 307, it has grouped together first name, last name, and email address. Notice also within that grouping, do you guys see where it says listener information? Okay, and that is changed, and we'll do this within our style sheet. This is going to be a blue, small, italicized text, okay, that we're going to see for each of the legends, that's what it calls it, but I typically refer to it as a label, for each of the groupings. Okay, so we're going to group all of these together, beginning with the first. We're going to call these field sets. When you group them together, okay, you group them as a field set. So I want to scroll back up to the top here because my first grouping is going to be the first name, last name, and email address section. So I need to go back and find that. And I'm actually going to put this above the section. It doesn't matter where you put it, but just easier for me to read if we do it that way. All right, so I'm going to put in, as it shows me at the bottom of page 307, the field set tag, the legend tag, because the field set creates the grouping. The legend tag creates the label. Okay, so I'm telling it I want a legend, and I'm telling it that the legend needs to say listener information, because then I have an end legend tag. Now my field set actually doesn't end until after all of the email address information, so that's where I need to put my ending field set tag. Okay, so the field set is what groups everything together. So everything you want grouped together needs to go between your beginning and ending field set tags. And then if you want a label on it, that's your legend tag. Okay, and you need to put the text within your legend tag. Okay, so that's going to create our first field set. If we turn over to page 308, we continue with our other groupings. So my next field set comes before the select the types of music that you prefer. So I'm going to put in my field set tag there. I do want a legend on it because it's the music genre and purchasing habits. Now my field set grouping includes the checkboxes and the radio buttons. So I'm not going to put my end field set tag until I'm done with all the radio buttons. Okay, so this particular grouping includes the checkboxes and the radio buttons. And then finally, my last grouping. How'd it go?
Oh, fine. But I know why I teach high school.
Yes, exactly.
Those shrill voices.
Exactly.
It's killer. Next one.
Okay, so our third field set is going to be inclusive of favorite radio station through the name of the radio station not listed. Okay, so that's where we're going to put in our last field set grouping here. So when I finish getting all those added in and I save it and I preview it, okay, I can see my groupings. Okay, now my text isn't blue and italicized yet because I haven't put in the embedded style sheet. But at this point, I should at least see the rectangles around the individual sections that I created or the field sets, and they each should have the legend on them. So any problems with getting the field sets grouped together or the legends showing? Everyone's working okay? All right, let's finish up by adding the embedded style sheet then. So we've got a notation up here on line 7 for the embedded style sheet, and we can pick that up on page 310.
So do we get to like actually fill this out and see what people said? Like, what? It's send it to some weird email. But
No,
you
'cause-
send it to yourself.
Yeah.
Would it actually work?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to try that.
Mm-hmm. I thought you were ahead of me.
Yeah, I was.
That's too bad.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should come and help. Do you know where